Okay, once again, good afternoon, everybody. This is Richard Parker from Tech Data, and we are going to go ahead and get today's webinar session underway. This is part of our regular Tech Data Cloud series that we usually do here, and today's guests will be Micro Focus. But before we turn it over to John at Micro Focus, just want a couple housekeeping items. If you have the ability on your end, if you can mute your line, this way we can block out any background noise. We'll try to do the same thing from our side, but sometimes the phones unmute themselves by themselves. But if you can unmute, can you please do that on your end? Then also, if you have any questions for today's presenter, please use the chat feature. And then we'll be able to see the questions when they come over, and then we can read them off to everyone using that feature at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get everything turned over to John Eisenhoff, and he's with Micro Focus, and should be very informative presentation. So John, I think you got the controls, and I think your line is going to get you unmuted here real quick. And John, you should be able to speak now.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity. And thanks to Tech Data and the TD Cloud Group for allowing this opportunity to speak with you folks today. And first, what I'd like to do is introduce myself. My role is the partner executive in our partnership with Tech Data. And if you're viewing the screen, you can see that my email is just john.einhaus@microfocus.com. I also want to point out that two of my colleagues over at Tech Data who are working with us from the Tech Data side are Steve Curtis and Silvana Bellevue. And Silvana and Steve are, their emails are there as well, and it's just basically first and last name at techdata.com. But without further ado, let's get into the presentation. We're going to try to keep this as brief as possible, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us or ask during the chat period. So we're going to talk about how to prevent identity-based breaches, how you can help your customers do that. And we do that here at Micro Focus with products that help with secure single sign-on, that's the SSO on your screen, and risk-based multi-factor authentication. So how do we understand what risk-based and multi-factor authentication is, just to set a couple of level sets here? Well, one example of multi-factor authentication is probably something that everybody knows about, and that's when you go up to a gas pump with your credit card, they will ask you for your zip code. And that is an example of a consumer-based multi-factor authentication. In this case, you have, of course, the credit card, and that gets authenticated, but something you know is your zip code. And in fact, multi-factor authentication is the factors, the different things that you might get asked about are something you have, something you know, or maybe something you are, like a biometric, like a fingerprint. An example of multi-factor authentication or a two-factor authentication in the business world are hard tokens, like an RSA token. When people are logging in through the VPNs in a remote format, a lot of organizations that have security or compliance concerns will use these hard tokens to provide a one-time password that gets sent to that hard token. And these are great. These are secure. However, they are relatively expensive because of the back office infrastructure and the tokens themselves, which somehow manage to get lost or at the bottom of a pool somewhere. An example of risk-based authentication is something that you all may be familiar with as well. And that's an example of if you are logging in to your bank account from a new computer, then in this case, the bank may send you a step-up authentication request, which could be a question, some sort of question response. Of course, it could be other things besides question responses as well, but this is a classic example of risk-based authentication. There's a little bit more risk that's added when someone is logging in with their login and password from a new computer. Let's figure out, is this really the person who they say they are? So there are a couple of terms that you may hear when we're describing risk-based authentication and multi-factor authentication. And risk-based sometimes is also called adaptive authentication, meaning different place, different role from login. Step-up authentication, where we're adding another level of authentication or two-step authentication. Multi-factor authentication is sometimes called two-factor or three-factor. It could be called strong authentication or advanced authentication. So why is this interesting to the folks that are on this call today? Well, we think we know. And in fact, Verizon does its data breach information report on an annual basis, and they find that the breaches occur 76% of the time, overwhelmingly the majority of the time, based on network intrusions because of an exploitation of weak, stolen credentials. So passwords are weak, and bad guys can figure out what the password is for somebody, they can get into the system, and then they can do their bad stuff. And a couple of famous examples. There's plenty of famous examples of this right now, but here's one example for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, where the DBA was actually looking at the computer usage screens, and he saw that somebody was logged in under his user ID. And so here in this case, of course, somebody broke into the system, stole sensitive information using the DBA's own user ID credentials. Another example is the federal government, the Office of Personnel Management, where people lost their jobs. The head of that organization lost their job because hackers stole user accounts and passwords and were able to go in and get all sorts of sensitive information about employee records of the federal government. And that was, of course, embarrassing and costly. Also, by the way, that the Target CEO lost his job because a contractor had their identity breached, and that contractor's credentials were used to get in and stole credit card information. So it happens in all industries, and in fact, different industries and different types of organizations have regulatory compliance standards that state that you need to have some form of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, and that includes HIPAA, it includes federal standards, it includes state and local standards, it includes PCI DSS. So there are a lot of mandates that say access control is important. It's obviously important for security, but it's also important for compliance. So let's take a look at a couple of risk-based and multi-factor authentication scenarios that we find. Here's an example of a low-risk example, where in this case, an end user is logging on to his email from his desk. In this case, the risk is low. The person is at his office. They may have access cards to get into the office itself. The email itself is not a critical system, low risk. A little bit higher risk, maybe it's that same user, but now that user is accessing financial information for the business. In this case, maybe a two-step or a step-up authentication may be required. The risk is a little higher, the situation is different, so therefore we may ask for another couple of questions or another form of access. And here's a high-risk example where we have a ninja in a foreign internet cafe accessing sensitive information. In this case, the risk is high. Or in that case, for instance, it could be a financial officer who is in a hotel room in a different state or a different country, where the organization may say, look, we need to provide access, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the person who is accessing this information over our secure VPN is the person who they say they are. So there are a couple of lead-ins for this. Where do the requirements come from this? And here are four common ones. One is where a customer may say, I need multi-factor authentication across my critical systems. I don't need it everywhere. I don't need it across every single one of my systems, but I need it to be applied to my critical systems where other people's information is being stored. Maybe employee information, citizen information, credit card holder information, patient information, those kinds of things. A second might be, I need my authentication to be adaptive, to understand risk, which means let's step up the authentication depending on who is accessing what information from what location. And let's set in different types of authentication standards based on those situations. A third could be, I need seamless access, secure single sign-on for all of my apps, including my SaaS apps, with contextual access. And what this means is, I mean, let's think about it. One of the single biggest reasons why people hack passwords is because passwords are weak. And one of the reasons why passwords are weak is because organizations require their end users to remember so many that the only way an end user can remember the password is to make a weak password. However, anybody can remember one strong password. So if you have a strong, secure, single sign-on with risk-based authentication, you create a very secure profile. The fourth is, I need more secure access for external users or end customers or partners, and that might even be mobile access for mobile devices, and I need to be able to control that. So for the multi-factor authentication, the challenge is that critical systems hold sensitive information, and that sensitive information might be regulated for compliance purposes. So the question is, you know, how are you securing your VPNs? Do you have any information that is beholden to regulatory compliance? And here what you can do is you can help position our solution for the win, because we provide one integrated solution for remote, on-prem, and web-based authentication methods, and we have an all-you-can-eat multi-factor authentication model, meaning we support hard tokens, we support soft tokens, we support YubiKeys, we support cards, biometric, and because of our support scenario is so wide and so vast, you can future-proof the cost model for maintaining this multi-factor authentication system, because there's support for many, many methods, and it only grows as new methods come about. For having adaptive authentication that understands risk, the understanding here is, and the challenge here is, how do you prevent access from outsiders who acquire insider credentials? And in this case, these outsiders are more than likely logging in from the outside, which means how do you authenticate based on risk, based on where the person is located who's logging in, and stepping up for different types of authentication based on the fact that, hey, this kind of logon is for a sensitive place within our organization, and this kind of logon is from a place that is not a usual login area. And so you could extend it, and you could create a good security and governance policy based on risk-based authentication. The other is back to seamless access, single sign-on for all my apps. If I have one logon for all my apps, I, as an individual, can remember that password, even if it's a strong password. If I have too many passwords, I can't remember 5 or 12. At the same time, administrators and compliance officers need to be able to report on who has access to what information, and then administrators need to be able to add and remove access to all the systems that people have access to. If you have all of that in one place, it's easier to administer and report on access, and we provide that for you. Another is secure access for external users and customers, partners, and the like. In this case, how do you make sure that you create a seamless, easy to access scenario for your applications that provide external access? How do you make that experience pleasurable? How do you make it easy? But how do you still make it secure based on the type of information that's being accessed? And we could provide that type of multi-factor authentication, or even lower scales of authentication for not only normal computer access, but also mobile access, tablets and phones and such. We have a couple of real-world customer wins where organizations are using these, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but here's an example of a college, Boston College, that's using NetIQ Advanced Authentication Framework. And in this case, they're providing multi-factor authentication for their students and their staff. It's also based on NetIQ's existing additional products in identity and access, where we have other products that go well beyond this for organizations that have identity management and privileged user requirements. And we're also supporting the standards where, in this case, students could use YubiKey devices, basically USB plugs that plug right into their computer, and that gives them access to the systems that they need to do their work, but no more access than what they need to do their schoolwork. Palm Beach County, here's a government example where they have a VPN security. They owned an existing two-factor product that they found lacking because they wanted to take advantage of the additional types of authentication that we provided. And here they're providing client logins, in this case citizens who are accessing systems, and business to consumer interactions as well. So they're allowing employees and they're allowing citizens to get into their systems using this authentication framework. And then from a healthcare, Lakeland Regional Health, Clark and Daughtry, this one is also coincidentally based in Florida, where they had HIPAA requirements, and because of that, the administration of access was taxing on the IT staff, and they estimated that their payoff for implementing our solution was about a 9-month time frame. So a little bit about differentiation. Here's one of the big keys. The types of devices and the types of authentication continues to grow. And what we say is don't paint yourself into a corner. Don't buy a solution that is a one-trick solution or a two-trick solution. Buy something that can handle all of the different authentication methods that are available. And in this case, there are hardware-based ones that lump you into one place and provide a back office infrastructure that's expensive or phone-based. With our solution, you could use all of these. Of course, you would need to purchase the additional hardware that would integrate into our solution, but the back-end framework would be there and in place from one point where you can administer and manage. Finding opportunities. How do you find opportunities for this kind of thing? Well, one of the first places to look is end customers who work in regulated industries: healthcare, financial, state and local government, education, retail. Any of these organizations that have regulations do have requirements to have these kinds of standards in place, and so those would be low-hanging fruit. Look for organizations that are delivering new levels of remote access for their employees or for their partners or for their customers. Everybody's opening up their websites and opening up their systems to additional access from different places. This is, again, low-hanging fruit for finding potential customers. Look for organizations who are grappling with that mobile and BYOD user. Look for the enabling of sensitive transactions for customers and partners, and organizations that recognize the need to update their access and authentication capabilities. They might already have a hard token system in place that is expensive, and what they might be looking to do is replace that existing cost with a lower cost system that will grow with their needs. So some of the conversation starters you might have, or what level of concern do you have around stolen credentials? I guess that's a conversation starter, isn't it? Or do you have internal information that needs a higher level of protection from unauthorized access? Do you have sensitive information that's either your own corporate or organizational information, or what I like to call other people's information, like patient information or credit card information? Another question is, how are you mitigating potential threats from third-party providers? So if there are cloud-based systems that you're using and they have their own standards, how are you making sure that you're incorporating the strongest and not you having that third party create a weak level for accessing your information? Ask about BYOD. People are, again, using tablets and phones either as employees or as partners or as customers. And that provides a level of risk because of the access point. If there's a VPN in place, that means people are accessing remotely, period. So, what are you doing to secure that access with authentication? And, of course, if you have existing tokens, hardware tokens, would you like to replace them with something that is of the same or equal security and lower cost, and also more future-proof. One of the big questions, of course, is how much? What does this all cost to put it all together? And here what we've come up with are the parts, the list prices, and an estimated customer price. And I know this is dangerous, and see that little tilde there? That means it's estimated. And so what we're saying here is if you get your costs from Tech Data and you mark it up, you can enjoy a pretty reasonable margin and charge these prices. Now, what I'd like to do is direct you to the very bottom, where at the customer price in the very bottom, the annual cost for a subscription for these is $26.27, which means the monthly cost per user is $2.19. That's the price that you would charge your customer for this. And what you'd get for this is basically the single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. You would get that for customers with web and cloud apps. You'd be using soft methods only, so soft tokens, SMS text, challenge response questions, those kinds of things. No, we're not talking about hard tokens in this case. That would be extra. And also, in addition to this, one of the nice benefits we'll get to later is you can register these things. If you are one of our partners, which is easy to sign up for through Tech Data, you can get a deal registration. And in fact, let's talk about that. Tech Data has a program in place called Going for Gold. And one of the benefits with Going for Gold is that if you find a new license opportunity for these products or any products of the Heritage, Novell, NetIQ, or SUSE brands that are part of Micro Focus, then you can get a deal reg through Tech Data. And Going for Gold includes, in addition to that deal reg, education, marketing, and favorable margins through Tech Data. And in fact, if you'd like to learn more, you can please contact Silvana. And by the way, that's Silvana in the picture right there. And she will be happy to help you get more information on how to qualify for the Going for Gold. We also have our own PartnerNet program that provides all sorts of enablement. And if you sign up for Going for Gold at Tech Data, one of the keys is you also must join this PartnerNet program. And again, if you're joining it as an entry-level partner, you don't need to have any certifications in place. However, if you do that, you can qualify for that DISTI Deal Reg program. As you proceed and become a higher-level status partner of ours, you can qualify for our own deal registrations through Micro Focus, which are even more generous than the DISTI Deal Reg. You could also get certifications, but even without those certifications, you have access to enablement, product downloads, technical support, marketing material, all the things that you need to help you make successes for your customers. And that is the end of the presentation. I breezed through it pretty quick, but I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions and answers. And Richard, why don't we go ahead and open it up if that's okay.
All righty, thank you, John. So once again, if you have any questions for John about today's presentation, what you heard, use the chat feature and we can read the question as we see them come through. No questions yet. I got a shout out from Patrick Wong. How you doing, Patrick? And while we're waiting, just want to let everyone know that if you want to go back and listen to this recording again, it will be posted out on our YouTube site. So what you have to do is just go out to YouTube and you can keyword Tech Data Cloud, and you'll get a chance to view all of the recorded webinars that we've done this past year. Well, John, I don't see any. Oh, we got something in. Hold the horses. All right, John. So, are there any minimum use sales requirements?
In terms of number of users?
Yes.
Technically, no. The price is per user, and it starts at user 1. There is maybe a practicality where if there is only one user, it's probably not all that practical to have this kind of a situation. But even in smaller organizations that have these security concerns, these products still perform well. And they all, each of the products that I talked about are virtual appliances. So the requirement is that you'll need to have VMs in place for each. But outside of that, that's probably where the scale down is. In terms of number of people, if the security and the compliance is there, then these are valid products to have.
Okay. Okay, next question is, what are the expected costs of implementation and who performs the implementation?
These are, the products I'm speaking of here are relatively simple products to deploy. And in relatively simple implementations, you can literally stand up the products and get them deployed in about a half day to a day's time frame. Now, what that doesn't mean is that the full implementation is done, because incrementally over time, of course, you may want to add in different policies for different people and different roles and such. And of course, for larger organizations, the time might be longer to put in place a full implementation. But the actual standing up of the products and linking them into the systems is a very quick and simple process. Now, who does that depends. We can do it. We provide professional services that we can sell that will do it as well. But we also believe that these particular products are simple enough that with a little bit of testing and training from us, that our partners would be able to do this ourselves. We do have plenty of other products that require a lot more time in terms of implementation, but the ones that we're speaking about here for this are relatively simple and don't require as much. I hope that answers the question.
I'm pretty sure you did a good job answering the question, John. Hey, one other question here is, I think I'm reading this right, but remember when you were talking about the example clients? Looks like one of the customers wants to know how long ago were those accounts. Does that make any sense?
How long did those occur?
Yeah.
That's a good question. The short answer is I don't know. I do know that each of those examples are using our advanced authentication products, and that product is relatively recent. So I would say it's probably fair to say maybe within the last 2 years or so.
Okay. Another question here. Someone wants to know how can they obtain a demo or a in-house for in-house trial purposes.
Well, you could contact me, or you could contact Steve Curtis, and either one, we each have the first last name at ourcompanyname.com there on the screen that you could see there, and we could get you in touch with getting the downloads. An easy way to get to the download is to go to that partnernetprogram.com website, and if you sign up, you can just go ahead and request the downloads. I would recommend that you arrange with me or Steve to get in touch with one of our sales engineers, just to make sure that you know where you're putting stuff and how to stand it up in your environment so you can make it work for yourself.
Okay, well, thanks for those answers. Once again, anyone has any questions for John, you can send over a chat. Well, John, looks like the Q&A session is over. Did you have any other questions you wanted to close with, or statements?
Yes, I just want to say thank you all again. We're looking forward to working with you, and please feel free to reach out to me or Steve if you have any questions. And we'll be very, very happy to support you win your opportunities and your deals with our products and with Tech Data. So thank you all very much.
Okay, that concludes today's webinar session. I want to thank everyone for joining, and please, join us again in the future. Be on the lookout for more webinars as we go into the new year. Thanks again.